Hi, and welcome to the last episode in the second season of the Technically Creative podcast. Every episode this season has looked at creativity and technology through a different lens, from production and data to technology and art. This one is a little bit different, and I think you're going to like it. Yves Bergquist is the director of the AI and Media Project at USC's Entertainment Technology Center. This is a place where every major studio, from Warner Brothers to Netflix and Sony, sits at a table to discuss how technology will redefine entertainment in the future. Yves is also the CEO of Corto AI, a platform decoding the narrative DNA of stories, helping studios, brands, and creators understand what audiences really feel and where trends are headed. But this conversation isn't just about AI and Hollywood. It's also about stories. It's about the ones we're entertained by and the ones we tell ourselves. At the end of this episode, we have one of the most human conversations we've had on this podcast. As somebody who personally, I've been in the program for 7.5 years, and I was really moved by Yves's honesty. It's a reminder that behind every piece of data and every creative breakthrough, there's a human being, flawed and curious and still learning. And I think it's a fitting end to the season, a reminder that even in the age of AI and with all the technological changes happening, creativity is still the most human thing we have. And our flaws make us better at it, not worse. So thank you. Thank you so much for being a subscriber and watching and listening. We've done 30 episodes so far. And I don't think we would have gotten this far if we hadn't had the encouragement and support of everybody watching. So thank you. Please like and follow, and please comment and tell us what you think, especially if you have negative feedback. If there's things you don't want to see more of. We'll be back at the end of January with new episodes and a few improvements. We probably won't have as much glare from the screens in the background and things of that sort, or even in my glasses. We're going to make some improvements, but we'd love to any comments you have about what we should improve. We're listening, so please let us know. For now, I'll just say thank you for supporting us. Thank you for listening and watching, and please enjoy my chat with Yves Bergquist. Yves Bergquist, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Getting to speak to anybody at the Entertainment Technology Center is very exciting. And you're the director of AI and neuroscience and media at the Entertainment Technology Center at USC. That's incredibly exciting all by itself, and I can't wait to get so into that. But also, you're the CEO and founder of Corto AI, and I would love to understand more about that as well. So you're in this great situation where you're both a sort of SaaS founder and technology user and company developer, as well as having this amazing role at the ETC. So first of all, I'd just like to say welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Good. Well, yeah. So you direct the kind of AI and blockchain and media project at the ETC. For listeners who might not know about the ETC, can you explain what it does and how it partners with the major studios?
Yeah. So the ETC was created in 1993 on the impulse of George Lucas, the George Lucas, at the School of Cinematic Arts at USC, best film school in the world, number one. And at the time, it was created to have a place where the studios could discuss interoperable standards around digital cinema. And over the years, so it's been over 30 years, and Lucas thought the studios needed a place where they could discuss technology as a whole, but especially digital cinema, far away from regulators and in a completely antitrust safe environment, an academic environment. And so over the years, we've evolved to be a very central place in the entertainment industry and the media industry as a whole to discuss technology, prototype new standards, and also do a lot of R&D, which is what I do. And it's really cool because all the studios sit on my board, all the CTOs of the studios sit on my board. Companies like Dolby, Amazon, Google. So we have tech companies, we have entertainment companies, and we have this big giant conversation and sandbox because we're developing a lot of new systems and protocols. It's tremendous. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know a single place, frankly, in any industry, perhaps maybe the MIT Media Lab, where you can talk to a whole industry at once, right? And you can affect a whole industry. So it's super exciting. I'm having the time of my life. It's been 10 years, and man, I'm ready for 10 more years. I'm not going anywhere. I love that place.
That's awesome. It is incredibly unique. When you say talking to the whole industry, obviously, the studios have kind of been like the five families. It's
Hmm.
you don't need to kind of speak to absolutely every person. You just need these big conglomerates and media companies to be at the table. How does the conversation flow? What do you learn from them? And what do they learn from you? Do you get sort of marching orders of things they want to consider? Or do you much more kind of go, no, we're more tapped in. We're going to tell you where things are going?
Hmm. It's both. I think, we've been talking about AI since I started, right? So 9+ years. And it really is a dialogue, right? There's a lot of realities about the content production, post-production process that I'm not aware of. I'm not a post-production executive. I'm a technologist, and so it's really so you have these sort of two polarities, these two realities of like technology and AI over here, and content production over here, and so it's a dialogue, right? So a lot of the times we say, hey, there's this coming up. Do you want to play with it? Or I'm giving an example. We are engaging in a project. We're starting a project called the Content Fingerprinting Initiative. And the Content Fingerprinting Initiative is an opportunity for us to test, is there a mathematical answer to copyright claims on generated output, right? So when does a car that you generate on VO3, for example, become a Batmobile that is protected by copyright? When does a voice that you would generate becomes the voice of a major talent, right? So there's a possible mathematical answer to this, right? Through vector embeddings. So this is a perfect example of like, we come to the studio and say, hey, we have this opportunity. We'd like to investigate it. We get some funding. We test the idea. We get some of their assets. And we test the idea. If it works, it works, and it gets deployed in the entire studio system. If it doesn't work, well, we failed very cheaply, very quickly, far away from anybody, right? So we can really be very aggressive in the kind of stuff that we try technologically. And if it works, it's like all upside, and then the entire industry suddenly has a system and a standard that they can use. So
It's a sort of new version of hashing, right? So
yeah.
yeah, so like for people who don't know, the hashing is kind of a digital fingerprint for a media file that you can kind of, you can judge against things. The FBI famously uses it when it comes to, child pornography. They hash the digital piece of media, and that way they can make sure that no human actually needs to see those things in order to be sure that this is a piece of known, flagged and horrible content. Sorry, that's a really dark example, but it's a real world use case.
It's essentially, is there an opportunity to represent the features, the features of a voice, the features of a car or a character, um, into a vector space where you can have a fairly precise mathematical answer to, well, your car is within a certain cosine distance of my protected IP, in which case we decide that this is too close and you have to, it's great. I mean, it's like it's a sandbox where if I very often I have an idea, right, in my shower, and then, a month later I'm working on it and prototyping it with my team. And if it works, it's deployed throughout an entire industry. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah. That there really is phenomenal. I mean, it's such an exciting place to be. It feels like you guys kind of get to be in a constant sandbox playing with things that you have a reasonable expectation are going to be used by these studios long term.
Yeah,
You know,
and I spend a lot of time on lots, which is film lots are like one of the most magical places. I mean,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. What's an experiment you've run at ETC that really surprised you about the relationship between stories and audiences, and how these studios can really use these technology for maximum impact?
So it's hard to get in details, but along, we've been doing a lot of R&D, mostly in my startup, but also a little bit at ETC on trying to understand narrative in an algorithmic level, at a DNA level. It's really my big thing. It's my life's work. It's the stuff that I really the most excited about. Been doing a lot of research around understanding the semantic relationships between certain character archetypes, certain narrative structures, and conversations in the audience, certain attributes of the conversation in the audience about the character or about the film or the TV show, and how that impacts performance, right? So we have a sort of a triangle between the features of the content, the features of how people talk about the content, which is really, really relevant, and the features of performance, putting all that together. Years ago, we worked on Mr. Robot for NBC, and we were able to tell them, to give them very specific insights about when the main character of Mr. Robot has these emotional tonalities, these sort of emotional arcs, the audience will be turned on or turned off by those, and this is how it impacts your performance. I mean, we've done that, dozens of times over the years.
And where does that feedback data come from? Does it come from social media? Are you getting control groups or test groups that you're running that against? How do you collect that data and understand it?
The audience data is generally from our side. So the studios have their own research. From our side, it's generally social media data, MDB, Rotten Tomatoes, social media. We have the largest set of social media sources anywhere in the world. Literally, I was working on this one. We have like 65 65 places we can go to collect it, including in like China and Korea and Japan, Africa and Indonesia and Brazil and so on and so forth. So it's very extensive.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I know you've studied Chinese film audiences as well, and
Hmm.
foreign film audiences through online conversations. What are the main patterns that stand out compared to sort of US audiences? I mean, I imagine, we're gone are the days where people only talk about box office being domestic box office. Everything is international, has an international lens on it now. What are you learning from that data that's coming back about foreign audiences versus US audiences?
So what we're learning right now is audiences. There is sort of a kind of a global zeitgeist that is emerging where audiences choose exchange with one another extensively and in real time. And so what this does is local values and norms, local cultures, right, kind of gets steamrolled by the sort of the emerging global culture. There are still a lot of local particularities, especially in Asia, for example, in the way that characters, for example, are motivated by their own intrinsic struggles or looking for personal power, personal gain versus the benefit of the community, right? So that's a really, really big theme in China, for example, than in Asia. But increasingly, it's really interesting that we're seeing sort of like Gen Z, for example, like Gen Z culture is very, very homogenized, much more than you think across the world. It's really interesting. Everybody's watching the same things and riffing on the same things. It's kind of cool, actually. In a way, it's cool. In another
Yeah.
way, it's a little scary.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember there was a great example of the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. One of the reasons it didn't work in Russia was because when they polled the audience in every other territory, the audience would give the right answer. But in Russia, the cultural reality was people would give the wrong answer. They didn't want to see that person succeed. And so they would purposely give them the wrong answer. And, I forget what the book was called, but it was sort of the notion that, for the way we look at things, like so much research data is based on basically white Anglo-Saxon Protestants or white university educated, kind of people. And that we sort of, so much of our suppositions about the world and about data and about the way people interact with things is based on this actually really non-diverse test group. And so it's
Hmm.
very interesting that now we've got globalized data in a much more real way.
Yeah.
Do you localize the data by country or do you have different models for each territory or EMEA versus Asia versus US?
We have different models so we process about 27 languages. We have unique models in about a dozen of them, meaning that models that are trained in that language. And then we kind of look for the same things across cultures and languages, but the way we're looking for them, the way these things are expressed. For example, like purchase intent, right? The way purchase intent is expressed, the way influence to purchase is expressed is different in certain languages. I'm going to give you an example, really fascinating. We've been working with a really big CPG company about deodorants in India. What we were able to tell them was really, really interesting and layered around Indians are, have a lot of traditional ways to, they have their own traditional deodorants, if you will, right? They have different methods. And so Western deodorants are really sort of like starting to penetrate in India in a big way. And we were able to realize, looking at the conversations about deodorant, that big sibling, like older siblings, big sisters, big brothers, had a tremendous influence on younger kids in getting them to adopt certain beauty routines and wearing deodorant and stuff like that. That was really, really interesting. And again, we can only do that if we're looking at specific aspects of how people express this in Hindi and Gujarati and other, Bengali and other languages in India that we're processing.
You were talking about how with Mr. Robot as an example, the plot arcs and storytelling devices and character moments and things like that affect user engagement or interest and whatever else. How do you optimize for that in the creative process? Certainly it must be easier in a television program where you're making it almost as much in real time as possible. But how do the creatives optimize using that data?
Yeah, so it's obviously a lot easier in TV where it's an ongoing, right, creative process, and you have this conversation, it's almost real-time conversation with the audience. With film, it's a little bit different, where we are able to process a script, get a bunch of comparables that are, so we analyze all the narrative DNA of the script. We get comparables. We have 1 million scripts in our database. We have the largest script database in the world. And so we can say, okay, well, this story is like these 25 stories. And then we go out to social media and we pull data on these particular comps. And we say, okay, your audience really cares about your audience. Like a lot of stuff that we find out, for example, is people care a lot more than a lot of industry executives think about the story itself, right? And a lot less about the cast, for example, right? Especially in North America. It's different in international markets. And then we say, all right, well, for this kind of projects, they are really going to put a lot of emphasis on the VFX. They're going to put a lot of emphasis on the story. They like these kinds of characters. Oh, and by the way, these are the brands that they like. These are their lifestyle. These are their cultures, right? And a lot of the time, so in the traditional development process, people read a script and then, they get together and say, well, here are the comps, right? And generally the comps, and we've done some side-by-side comparison, generally the comps that people come up with are very mapped to the genre. So you'll have a spy script and the comps will be, James Bond and Bourne Identity, stuff like that. There'd be very sort of literal comps, genre to genre or subgenre to subgenre. The AI model will pick up on little narrative DNA nuances and will say, well, your script, which, you thought was a spy script, sure is a spy script, but there's a huge horror genre flavor to it. So here's a whole new category of people you can start marketing your project to, and this is what they care about. So what we're doing is we're bringing the marketing process into the development process so that from day one, marketers can say, this is our target audience. This is what they're going to care about. This is when it's going to turn them on. This is when it's going to turn them off, and so on and so forth. And then throughout the production, post-production process, we can actually optimize narrative level, like color, like to the level of the color, the white balance, the shot types into what these audiences really like and really want. And I think that is essentially what this is creating, is a gigantic opportunity to personalize this content downstream. So this is really where everything is going, is that we're going to be able to personalize content to you and me and different tastes and different cultures and communities.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, when I see a movie, a John Hughes movie, like that was, undeniably shot in the 70s and 80s, I feel comfortable. That's, those are the movies I grew up on. It's like if somebody wants to target me, that sort of nostalgia. I mean, Stranger Things did it. The Duffer Brothers did it incredibly well. Like everything, that the way they shot it and all the props they used and everything else, I felt right at home in that. And that was wonderful.
Can I tell you something
Sure,
really
no,
interesting?
please.
Okay, based on that. So it really, really interestingly, yes, me too. So super impactful. Something that we're telling the studios more and more is Gen Z males, there's an opportunity for Hollywood to go back into the John Hughes movie type stuff, because Gen Z males really, really love to watch movies about people misbehaving. Do you know what the number one favorite iconic movie for Gen Z kids, males, boys, is? It's The Wolf of Wall Street, because of all of the antics in that movie, right?
Yeah.
So,
I
if you're
stupidly
watching
was going to
this,
say Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but
yeah, no, that's like
I
the
now understood. I now understand where I made the mistake.
the PG version of that. Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, exactly.
There is a huge market for like raunchy, um, out of control comedy in America right now. And so we've been telling this to the studios. Hopefully it translates into some really interesting projects. But like movies like Project X, for example, Wolf of Wall Street. It's like, John Hughes, but like on mega steroids, 2025 style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I think Vince Vaughn said it on an episode of Hot Ones, but he said the beauty of those films is that there was no high concept. The high concept was a human experience.
Hmm.
Skipping school is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Kids trying to get alcohol for a party is super bad. Like that's the whole idea wrapped
Hmm.
in, and it allows you to explore these amazing universal experiences. And now we're so wrapped up in this sort of post Don Simpson high concept world. I
Hmm.
almost feel like everybody's trying to do too much all the time and
Hmm.
actually just going, we just have something about like a guy just trying to
Yeah,
impress a girl. Like, let that be it.
hundred
I mean,
percent.
Grease essentially is a guy trying to impress his friends about this summer romance he says he had. It's all, that stuff's all fun and we've lost a lot of it.
And you're right. And I very, very much believe in the future of theater, like theater. Because what you described is theater, right? Theater is not like this just gigantic high concept thing. It's like you take one situation, one dilemma, and you just like drill really deep into it. And so I personally really believe in that theater is going to get a huge revival.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm encouraged just to hear that some simple storytelling might be back because of Gen
Hmm.
Z. It makes me like that generation a whole lot more. We spoke to Sergio Lopez, and he said a very interesting thing. Sergio Lopez is the head of production. He's the CEO of Omnicom Production. So he
Hmm.
was really talking about production from an advertising lens, but how, if you think 18 months back at the time of the recording, he was like, there was a different president. We had a different understanding of the voting population. We had a different understanding of the world than we do now. And
Hmm.
that's when a brand started figuring out what their campaign that's going to launch today is
Hmm.
about. And so, he was like, we talk a lot about production efficiencies and things like that as cost saving. He's like, but I actually think production and time efficiencies are less about cost saving and more about putting out things that are far more culturally relevant,
Hmm.
because the moment of ideation, the moment of release is much closer to the moment of ideation. I mean, how much of what you do in terms of data analytics almost needs faster production schedules to still be relevant? Because there must be a delta, surely, where you go, we believe that this is true. And as you get closer to the release date, you're like, well, it's no longer true.
So it's both. So, and that's sort of putting on my Cordo hat. So what Cordo does is zeitgeist intelligence, and the zeitgeist is very fast in certain ways and very slow in other ways, right? So you have culture really is sort of imagine like a Russian doll like structure, right? You have like little micro moments that are cultural moments that sit within a bit more trends, right? So you have the fads, and then you have the trends, and then you have the cultures. Things like the rethinking and shift around the masculine archetypes and the divine masculine, right? That's a longer trend, right? So, and we've done a lot of work on that for a big beverage conglomerate recently, where we were able to say, hey, this drink that you're trying to market needs a different male archetype than the one that you've put out, because your male archetype is following culture and not ahead of culture. So what we do is brands generally follow culture, right? Something's really hot, they sign a deal with them, and then they put out some campaign or some product. But then generally that's after that person reached their peak, right? What we try to do is all right, well, these are the rising trends and these are the waves that you can surf. There's very short-term waves, but there's also very longer term trends that we're advising these companies on. Yeah, things like relationship with men and women, relationship to your body, relationship to your work, relationship to your friends, and so on. Your relationship to food, right? This is something that those are very, very long-term trends, and you have to be able to differentiate one from the other.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you started with the conversation about Corto because I'd really love to understand more of it. I mean, it seems that you've taken so much of what you've learned from, at ETC in terms of data analytics and really finding ways to break down and quantify cultural understanding and cultural wants and needs and as that relates to storytelling.
And narrative, right? So it's like, where's
Right.
culture and where does my narrative fit in that culture? That's what we do.
Yeah, and so I mean, can you just explain more about that? I mean, what's the bite point? What was the thin end of the wedge where you go, okay, if we can solve this problem, then we'll get the opportunity to solve, many more with Corto.
So two things.
Mhm.
One, traditionally, the way that storytelling has been done, and I'm talking about in film and TV, but also in branding and advertising, is very top down. You have one or several people who say, hey, this is what we stand for, and this is the story we're going to tell, and then distribute that story to as many people as possible. What we're doing now is we're giving storytellers and media makers, so film, TV, advertising, branding, the tools to understand digital culture, digital communities, and at a very granular DNA level, what is that cognitive neuroscience relationship between the DNA of the stories that they're putting out there and how people react to them and what kind of outcomes that creates for sales, right? So it's what's the culture, what's the story, how do I fit my story in that culture in a way that's meaningful to me and my brand to be able to drive actual growth and revenue outcomes, right? Generally, we are very surprised, with all due respect to our customers, that very, very large brands, most of them, not all of them, some of them are very good, still are having trouble getting a finger on the cultures around them and how to leverage these cultures to grow. I mean, look, let's just say it plainly. Advertising just sucks across the board, right? It really does. So, and there's a reason for that, right? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to and people are very vocal about like how much advertising really sucks. People are very vocal about it. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect these brands and these companies and these corporations to cultures in a way that's very organic and authentic and meaningful. One thing that I really like, one nugget that I wanted to talk about that I really, really like to talk about is the most effective ad of all time is to show Yellowstone. So Yellowstone increased sales of Stetson hats and Lucchese cowboy boots by hundreds of percent, right? So the revenue of these companies are exploding because of the show Yellowstone. Paramount didn't get a single dollar from that, right? So it's free advertising for Lucchese and Stetson. But you can see how, it was a very, very powerful ad for the cowboy lifestyle without specifically saying, hey, just, like buy my product. Here's my product. You want it? Do you want to buy it? Right. That stuff doesn't work anymore. You have to create a story around it. You have to create a world around it. And so what we're doing is we're helping brands understand what that world should be in order to meaningfully move the needle for them as brands and also as corporations and
Yeah.
sell more stuff.
I mean, House of Guinness just launched, I think 2 nights ago on Netflix.
Hmm.
To be honest, I don't need a lot of nudging to want a Guinness at the end of a week, but I
Yeah.
suspect that a lot of people will be, splitting the G this weekend as a result.
Right.
Um, but so what data sets do you plug into with Cordo? Because obviously, one of the things I find fascinating is I think that actually, interestingly, what's becoming clear now is that tech very often in new products and new offerings is sort of almost falling away because everybody's plugging into a lot of the same Gen AI APIs, and that actually what really differentiates a piece of tech or an offering is the data sets that augment and that the Gen AI or machine learning models can tap into, and a user interface that has enough specificity and subject matter expertise embedded in it, that it's user friendly not just to anyone, but user friendly specifically to the experts who are going to be using it. But yeah, so what sort of data are you tapping into with Corto to be able to give those levels of analysis?
So let's head back a little bit because you said a couple things that I want to riff off of.
Mhm.
Generative AI solves the second biggest problem in media, which is how do we create content faster and cheaper, right? Doesn't solve the first one. The first problem is still what kind of story do we tell to what kind of audiences? And that's the problem that Cordo targets very, very specifically, right? This is the culture. This is where it's going. This is how you capture it to create revenue and excitement, right? So, you know, attention, like the war of attention is a real thing. Generative AI, the traditional media industry is experiencing some difficulty because attention now it used to own attention. Now it's completely fragmented in tens of thousands of channels, millions of channels. So what we do is we have three data sets. We have the content, the stories. So we have the brand or the studio, and this is your story. We have what audiences are talking about, right? So that's a ton of social media data, but also a lot of other things, Amazon reviews, Walmart reviews, and so on and so forth. And then we have performance. And so what we do is we have a lot of AI and machine learning models that are our own models that essentially will break down the content in the DNA of the story, right? That will break down. So it's like, okay, these are the color schemes. These are the shot types. These are the narrative archetypes. These are the emotional tonalities and emotional arcs and so on and so forth, the character types. This is the actions, I mean, it goes very, very deep into even like white balance and contrast and stuff. These are the conversations about this content, or these are the conversations about the culture that this content belongs in. And this is the performance. So you have the brand content, you have the social content, which is also a story, right? You have a lot of video. So we analyze the brand ads and social videos in the same manner with the same stack to try to understand, well, if you tell your story like this down to the color scheme, your performance will increase by X%. It's super, super effective. It's never been done before. I mean, this was really the holy grail of marketing, of being able to tune your messaging exactly to what is really, really hot and trending at the moment, almost in real time. And the beauty of generative AI, which comes as a complement to that, is suddenly we can, so we're actually prototyping with a large ad agency. Corridor detects a trend, matches the trend against pre-existing footage that they have for a specific brand, generates more footage, right, if need be, and uses Gen AI again to put together a rough cut of an ad or a social video that would be branded, and then a human editor will review it, right, make sure it makes sense and it's all tight, and then distribute it. Corridor measures performance, and then rinse repeat, so that the longer this runs, the smarter it gets, and it gets scary, scary smart. I mean, we're running all of advertising for a big CPG brand in India, for example.
Okay, let's say just taking one of the workflows, for example, let's say an ad. What is the best way for a brand advertising agency and production company to be working with Corto? What does that workflow look like in an ideal scenario?
There's the way it works best right now, and there's the way where it's going, right? The way it works best right now is a lot of brands and studios, for them it's very, very new, right? And so they don't necessarily have a staff of trained analysts who are going to be able to take the output of our models and say, oh, this makes sense and this makes sense in this way. So in this case, what we do is we work more as an agency where we have our own analysts who are using the Cordo stack to, pull the data, analyze the data, come up with some insights and come up with some conclusions and recommendations that make
So acting
sense.
like an internal brand strategist.
That's right.
Right.
The second way is, we're building software that is customized for each client that essentially allows them to pull the data, analyze the data, and put together the insights themselves. And the third way where this is going is much more programmatic. So, we're working with big media asset management companies, right, to be able to process the media assets with the Corto stack and sort of tag all of these media assets with very, very granular, like narrative DNA, right? And then we use Corto again to take what are the trends, right? What are the stories and the narratives in each different communities and industries that are really trending right now? Match them to the same tags and essentially kind of match those tags so that in real time, a brand or a studio can say, hey, this is trending in this community in a really big way. I have assets, I have like trailer assets that really match this, or I could, if I don't, if I only have 75% of the assets, I can use Gen AI to generate the 25% that I don't have. And then, here it is. Boom, let's go. So it's like a rapid reaction capability for marketers, whether it's studios or brands. That's
But
where everything is
presumably as
going.
well, if the goal is for it then to inform production decisions, surely then Corto then moves from the brand strategist position into the agency ideation role. And then presumably as well, that's given either as a mandate or Corto plugs in as well at the production company level. Is that how it should work?
It may. This still needs professional storytellers to take the data that we're giving them, and these are the trends, and turn them into really meaningful stories. We can give them a lot of detail about certain character types, certain character archetypes, certain situations, and certain topics. But I think at the end of the day, remember, not all of this is accurate. Not all these insights are accurate, right? So you need very, very acute and smart creatives to say, hey, this resonates with me and this not so much. And I'm going to take this and make something. I'm going to listen to this part of the insight, not listen to this part of the insight. So it does need still a professional class of people who really understand this stuff. That's why we spend a lot of time in our clients training them on how to interpret this stuff and, how statistically significant the insights are. For example, sometimes, we have a very, very small number of people talking about something, right? So that's not very statistically significant. Some other times we have a lot. So there's a lot of nuance in doing this work that we're
Yeah.
also trying to go into.
It's interesting because what you've kind of described for entertainment or advertising is actually, it moves film production, for example, much closer to the theory of or the way ad production works. Ad production comes from a very simple thing. A brand needs a piece of media that will have the result of changing people's minds to get them to purchase X, Y, or Z. And that is usually some sort of data conversation. It's an understanding that, okay, people currently think this about my brand. They think Adidas is not as good as Nike from a physical standpoint, but it is way cooler. For example, let's say Adidas understands that about themselves, and they say, okay, we want an ad that achieves this, and either leads into the cool, or actually we want to go against type, and we want people to think that we're a high performance product. The agency, which is the creative studio, gets that brief and gets that money, and then they go away and they go, okay, we're going to make a piece of creativity that's going to match this desired outcome. That sounds, putting that into the entertainer's hands, that actually is quite interesting because it kind of goes, we've got a marketing brief for this subsector of people. We want to make a movie that really hits 35 to 55-year-old males. Here's the brief on what that should look like. We're going to send some creatives at that brief and they're going to go execute it. Rather than studio executives, as it's always sort of worked, sitting around waiting for one of their general meetings or a script to come across their desk with a magnetic director, producer, or writer who goes, you know what hasn't come out in forever is a coming of age story of men 35 to 55 getting back to their childhood and going back to high school or whatever it is. It's flipping that script and making it more like a production pipeline we've seen before, but we've just seen it in ad agencies more than we've seen it on the entertainment environment.
So both of these things that you've described appear to be different, but they're actually the same. It's what we call top-down creative, right? And it's not down versus bottom up. It's the meeting. First of all, men 35 to 45, we're not in that world anymore. there's about 5 million segments in that
Yeah.
demo that you just described. Right? So it
Yeah.
gets
Weirdly,
very,
I
very
picked my own
complex.
demo.
Right,
What a
exactly.
shocker.
Me too.
The white male thinks of himself. What a
Yeah.
shock.
Exactly. So it's a little bit more nuanced than that, where we tell our clients, hey, in your market, these are the cultures, and these are the cultures that are very significant, that we think are really sort of meaningful, that are very rich in being able to create stories. So, for example, that going back to that CPG example in India, where it's like, well, if we know that older sisters, for example, have a huge influence in shaping the beauty routine and the healthcare routines of their younger sisters. Wow, that's a narrative we can latch onto. Like that's something that's a wave we can surf. Okay, and so we can go very deeply within that story to say, hey, this is how you put it together in ways that the data shows it's going to make sense. Or the creative can say, I'm going to take it from here, right? This was very interesting. I'm going to take it from here. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. Uh, and then you sort of roll the dice on whether that's meaningful or not. I would say that um, what really drives excitement is fresh and new things. And I think the marketing industry, the entertainment industry, for a lot of reasons that are very valid, really is having trouble taking risks on. It's less and less true. I think the stuff that we've seen coming out of Warner Brothers, for example, like in the past
Yeah.
12 months, has been really exciting, successful. I was really happy to see that. Increasingly, I think the risk in media production is in not taking risk and doing too much of what's been done before. And so I was really interested to see Sony Pictures, which is one of our clients at Cordo, come out with, K-pop Demon Hunters. We've been working with them for, 6 years in understanding the anime culture and the K-pop culture. This was, I mean, I'm shocked that it took that long for anybody in the media industry to say, oh, gee, anime is really big. Like K-pop's really, if it's been big for like 6 years, like stop. Like, why did it take 6 years, right? And I can give you many, many examples like this. And Sony, by the way, is super, super smart, very data driven, incredibly intelligent when it comes to this. Generally, I would say the studios get a bad rap on data and technology and using analytics, but they're actually quite good at it, right? There's just inherent, as you know, right? There's just inherent constraints in the media production process that, really limit their ability to react really quickly to certain insights.
Yeah.
But hopefully generative AI really helps in that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the other thing is like I know we romanticize the writer working and toiling in their office, coming up with a whole brand new idea, and then sending it out to the industry and some studio picking up and going, "It's the greatest new script in forever." But I think that one of the things that we don't romanticize enough is the idea that if you're able to tell people what you're looking for properly, they can still be writing that script in their office. They just have a much higher probability of it coming out and being something that eventually gets made. Hollywood is, so many people have given up their dreams of being a writer because they wrote something that was brilliant, but is just never going to get made because it's not within the needs of the studios at the time.
And I think it's going in a different direction now, which is what I call the let a million George Lucas bloom, right? I think what where this is going is we have now potentially millions of creators armed with the generative AI who are themselves very, very sensitive or very attuned to a specific aspect of pop culture, and who are going to create themselves content that fits within that culture. And then all the studios need to do is to monitor who is building an audience, right? And pick up the ones that are building their audience faster, which we're helping them do. By the way, we have this gigantic database of Gen AI creators, and the studios are very, very interested in monitoring who's building a meaningful audience, telling a story that really resonates in a specific community that the Cordo data shows will also resonate in other communities or has mainstream potential, right? So again, you'll see like, a million people will create, and then a lot of that content, like I think the next Star Wars is going to come out of UGC for sure, right? And so what we're doing is we're building the interface for the mainstream media community to understand um, who is doing something that has potential. The thing that, and it's really interesting, is increasingly, I think the studios are going to be focusing on their last strength, if you will, right? It used to be like they had the monopoly of distribution, they had the monopoly of content production, and they had the monopoly of understanding the audience and be able to market to them in a meaningful manner and the resources to do it. They've lost the distribution. They're increasingly losing the content production monopoly. What remains is their ability to understand culture and understand how to sell within a specific culture. And so I think there's sort of an emergent symbiotic relationship between UGC, which is going to be like high velocity, just lots of creativity everywhere, um, that does not have the ability, the knowledge, or the resources to market on a large scale, and the
Mhm.
studios which do, right? So that's the future I
Yeah.
think we're heading into.
Well, that's yeah, I do agree with that. Eve, we ask a question on this program of everybody. I had a great boss named Dan Wyden who said, "You're useless to me until you fucked up big at least twice."
Well, I'm going to be very useful to you, man.
Oh, really? Okay, because very often we get people who kind of say a lot of things just like, yes, failure is important, and
Hmm.
you got to fail fast and fail often,
Right.
and I find that actually it all works best when we're talking about something specific. But I'd love, can you remember, and would you be willing to admit a time where you failed and what you learned from it?
How long do you have? I mean, there's dozens of
I
stories.
could go on forever. This is actually always my favorite question.
No, I mean, look, I've been very transparent. The most famous one is very public. Several lives ago, under a different name and a different career, made some stuff up on my resume and did some other things, and was fired. And unfortunately, I was in a position where I had enough notoriety that it became a very. I was working at ABC News as a sort of consultant producer, but really more of a producer, a reporter. Um, and it became public, and I was fired very, very publicly. And everybody thought I was the Jason Blair of ABC. And even though ABC did a huge investigation and it was cleared of any wrongdoing in my reporting for ABC, I had lied and made stuff up. And I always tell people, like, I highly recommend dying. Like, there's nothing worse than failing just a little bit at a time every day, right? If you want to fail, just fail massively. And so that was essentially till the death. Like, I had a huge career, on Monday, on Tuesday, I had like 100,000 websites that were calling me a con man, right? This was perhaps obviously very painful, but the biggest opportunity for me to examine myself at a very, very deep level, which not a lot of people do. When you go to therapy, but it's kind of BSE, and not a lot of people really do the work. I had to do the work because it was like, crap, like, this is bad. Like, I
Yeah,
really messed up. Like, let's
yeah,
not do that again. Where does this come from? And so,
yeah.
looking at my own insecurities and
Mhm.
selfishness and trauma and all the stuff that sort of drove that massive breach of integrity was very useful. I'm not happy I did it because I really hurt a lot of people that loved me and cared for me and had, especially at ABC, had really gone to bat for me for my career and to help me and stuff. And I really screwed them over involuntarily, but still. And I really regret that very much. But it gave me the opportunity to start a journey in self-discovery, self-awareness that is still continuing today, where I'm able to see myself for who I am, understand where I am failing myself and my loved ones, understand how I get back to, baseline and show up, especially as a man, and give me a lot of humility and a lot of tools to actually really control my body, my emotions, my thoughts, my future, my work, my relationships in ways that is a lot healthier. It took a very long time for me to do that, and it's still going on. I'm still doing a lot of work around that. But that is a very spectacular screw up that the Hollywood Reporter wrote about, I think 5, 6 years ago. So you're welcome to go check it out. I really haven't had, this is really the first time that I have the opportunity to talk about it. And I've been meaning to talk about it publicly in a way that wasn't like self-serving or was promotional, but in a way that hopefully would help people. It's really important to be aware of your shit and handle your shit. I'm sorry, and I hope we can say that on your
No, you
podcast.
can absolutely swear it here. I mean, that's a fascinating. I mean, A, it's a fascinating story. B, I've not talked about it very often, but I got clean about 7.5 years ago, and I similarly like experienced some sort of ego death through doing a lot of that work. So I very much understand kind of where you're coming from, because obviously you have a lot of that dies and you do a lot of the work to reframe who you are, what you care about, how much of that who you were was just buoying up your insecurities. What were the things that did stay? When you kind of take away all those insecurity things, when you strip all that away, what are you left with, and what did you sort of keep about yourself, or what was the fire around yourself that you huddled around to go, no, this is good and this I'm going to take forward?
What stays is what saved me at the end of the day. And, I'm really, honestly, really proud to have been able to reinvent myself and, have a new life, a new career that is built on solid foundation. What stayed and what saved me is just hard work and hunger and hustle and curiosity and trying to think differently about identifying new opportunities. I've never written a resume. Everything that I've done, including starting Corto, obviously, but also my position at ETC, I walked into someone's office or gave someone a call and say, "Hey, I really want to work here. You don't have to pay me for 6 months. I'm going to show you my worth, but I don't want to work anywhere else." And I think this is tremendously exciting, and I just want this to be my life. And now that I'm hiring people, I understand how successful that was. And I wasn't kind of telling a story. It was like, this is generally how I felt. You can't train people to care about your company or where you work, right? And so you see someone who maybe doesn't have the exact qualifications right away, and you can train people in almost anything, but you can't train them to care very much. And so what express what I wanted clearly with passion, work very, very hard to show my worth. And that's kind of how I did it. And that's how I got my job at ABC, right? They hired me as a little consultant, and I took more work and I showed them that I was worthwhile and grew that way. It just so happened that it was based on very bad foundations, but it's the same thing that I've done at Cordo at ETC, is to really to work hard, be passionate, be curious, and really want to help others, whether it's my colleagues, whether it's the studios, or whether it's the my customers at Cordo, like genuinely want to help people. I think that's something that stands out for me.
Do you think that there's an overlap in what you do now versus what you do then? I mean, obviously being a sort of investigative journalist and comes with a fair amount of curiosity, a certain amount of chutzpah to be
hmm
putting yourself in situations you're trying to dig quite deeply into things. Do you find that there's an overlap there between what you were doing then and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an investigative reporter, you're selling
Mhm,
something,
mhm.
right? And it's actually a really, really hard sales job, because I was running around Pakistan selling to military and intelligence officers the opportunity to give me confidential information and risk their careers or their lives in exchange for zero. I mean, that is the hardest sell. So in many ways, it is my ability to sell back then a horrible deal to them, which luckily they took enough time for me to be successful, but to now sell in an environment where there's more of an equilibrium of value, where I'm actually providing value, and they're providing value. So there's a clearer and more balanced value exchange now. But selling is really the essence of the business. No one's gonna eat, if anyone's gonna eat, someone has to sell. And so that's
Mhm.
what I do, day
Yeah.
in and day out.
Yeah. I mean, because it does seem, looking at that part of your career, it seems like there was a huge amount of incredibly legitimate success and achievement. And
Mhm.
yet there were these, moments of, I don't know what you'd call it.
Yeah,
Um,
insecurity, lack of integrity, or shortcuts. I
right.
call
And
them
so
shortcuts.
how do you divide between those two? So you're doing all like an amazing amount of real work. and then these certain things that existed outside of that based on the insecurities you say. What did make you make that jump, and
Because
what
I
were
was an
those
idiot.
things, and what
Because I didn't understand that I'm enough. Like my work is enough. I needed to tell people that I had a PhD. I needed to make up these interviews. I needed to feel, but it was not for them. It was for me to make myself feel. I didn't recognize, no, 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 no. I'm enough. I'm recognizing that now. It's taken me so long, but like I'm enough. My work is enough. My mind is enough. My curiosity are all enough for me to be successful. I don't need anything else. I'm enough. That is something that is a very powerful realization. I think a lot of people feel this way that they're not enough. It in a way still fuels my hunger and my passion and my hard work to want to prove things and achieve things. It's a little bit healthier now in the sense that it's not really proving as much as it is breaking new ground and doing new things and building. It's more of a creative endeavor now versus fueled by insecurity. But the tragedy of all of this is I didn't need a PhD to work at ABC News or any of the other places I worked. I didn't need to make up these fake interviews. I didn't need to do any of that. Like I was enough, and I didn't think I was enough, so I had to create all these different, aspects to my persona to make myself feel better. I'm glad that I'm not glad it happened because I hurt a lot of people and I still carry that. Selfishly, this was something that essentially was the most important thing that happened to me.
Mhm. It's funny because that feeling of feeling enough, you almost think, you looking at it from the outside, you go, well, if I feel enough, I'm going to be arrogant. And weirdly, it's the not feeling enough
Yeah,
that
that
makes
makes you
you put
arrogant.
on an
Yeah,
arrogance that it is more likely to hurt others and hurt yourself than actually just feeling enough and going, well, this is the way it is. And, I'm sort of okay with that being the case. And I think that
yeah,
certainly for me, it's something I only found out through the program is,
yeah.
by letting go and taking ownership and saying that I'm enough, that could still come with humility
hmm
without having to come with insecurity.
I think insecurity and arrogance is out of insecurity. I mean, you and I have been in this industry long enough that we know the people who have like amazing careers and who are very accomplished in this business are really nice people. And the ones that are not are people who are insecure. I think it's important to, loving yourself is really, really important. And it took a very long time for me to love myself through my failures, what I had done, the little boy that's sitting inside of us, right? And to parent myself and love myself and parent that little boy is something that I do
Mhm.
now. Very, very important.
I see you two have done the chair exercise.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah. Um, well, I mean, listen, that's a wonderful, I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think that
Thank you.
I'm very sympathetic to it, having gone, having hurt people myself and being constantly trying to get rid of that shame while still feeling responsible without feeling shameful on an ongoing basis. And I really appreciate you sharing with that with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your journey with me. That was cool.
Well, thanks. I mean, just to end on a slightly different note, I mean, what is the thing, if you're looking at the work at ETC or the work at Corto, what's the thing you're most excited about?
I am most excited about the golden age of creativity that we're heading into. And I think the ability for anyone to have near Hollywood production capabilities and tell their own stories in a way that is meaningful to them is scary for the industry and for the people working in the industry that are real people with families and mortgages and I really, really respect that a lot. And also, if you like the craft and the art of storytelling, the next 20 years are going to be just absolutely insane in terms of pure creativity, not just from a UGC perspective, but you have to remember what's going on with regular Hollywood now is the studios are moving into the next level up of complexity of production, which is immersive, multi-platform, personalized content. So traditional Hollywood is really going to get into more of like, how do we tell the story of Star Wars across linear TV and theatrical and AR and VR and personal and location-based experiences. So we're moving in that world in Hollywood. And at the same time, the UGC world is really exploding with creativity. So I think these two trends together are going to be just awesome. And not to mention that, like, I think brands now and advertisers are getting have more appetite in really getting more into culture, in really telling more like edgier stories about more personal and authentic stories about themselves, and connecting with people more versus being like, hey, just buy this. So all of it, I think, is really taking our society into a much more creative world, and
Mm.
I'm super excited about it.
I feel the same way. It's funny when somebody said, who was talking about climate change, was saying, "Oh, we're hurting Mother Earth," and somebody else said, "Mother Earth is going to be fine. We're hurting humanity.
Hmm.
When we're all dead and gone, Mother Earth will be just fine, and
Right.
she will continue." And I feel the same way about creativity. As everybody's like, "Well, the creative industries and this, that, and the other thing," and a lot of people bemoaning it, but I'm like, creativity is going to explode in
Oh
a,
yeah.
it already has. There are more lighting kits and there are more people making short form content now than ever before. That's just going to change and move up the tree in terms of complexity and interest.
Right. To go
um
back to you have to go
yeah.
back to like hundreds of thousands of years ago, cave paintings, right? It's part of who we are. So it's not going anywhere, and in fact, it's going to get empowered because now a lot of the gatekeeping is falling away, and now it's just a wide open field. And I can understand why that's really scary for professionals in the industry. Totally understand. At the same time, it's kind of exciting from a pure artistic perspective.
Well, I mean, on that note, we can kind of end there. Eve, this has been so fun. I know I took you over time, but I was just so fascinated by talking to you, and really appreciate you opening up as well. And I'm so appreciative of your time, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely.